Hi everyone, so this is for the 2023 Pure Bio Sec 4 students taking O-Levels. And you just finished your paper 1. I want to say congratulations. It must feel great having the O-Levels just finally come to an end. I think for most of you, it should be, this is the last paper, right? Yeah, so congrats. And now I'll be going through the questions. I'll give you a full walkthrough tutorial of the questions. Now, I won't be explaining like every single content that slowly. I'll go quite fast and I'll try and focus on what is the fewest things you need to realize. Then once you realize those things, it makes the whole question a lot easier. Okay, so let's go through question 1. And so question 1, if you look at the second column, energy release, right? Which organelle does energy release? Ribosomes make proteins. ER, endoplasmic reticulum, also makes proteins because it has ribosomes on it. So this is the easiest one to help us with eliminating. So A and C are out. Okay, so it has to be B or D. Then I look at the right column, right? It's the same, so of course it must be correct. Then if I look at the left column, protein synthesis is ribosomes. Now the Golgi body, this one is a bit contentious because the Golgi modifies, sorts and package proteins and as well as other molecules that have been made. So you can argue that modifying proteins is part of protein synthesis. But which is the better option in this case? So for MCQs, always ask yourself which is the best option out of the limited options I have. So is it better to say Golgi body or ribosomes? So I think we'll all agree ribosomes is the better option because it's the true producer, the source of where the protein is made. So the answer is D. Okay, now we're on to question 2. Which has the correct labels for the cell structures and organelles? Option A, this is the nucleus, not the vacuole, so this is wrong. Okay, option B, nucleus, yes, is the one that is shaded. Vacuole, yes, the large central vacuole, chloroplast, and cell wall. Okay, B is the answer. But okay, you shouldn't be like me, you should go through all first before you choose. So now let's look at option C. Chloroplast, this is nucleus, so C is wrong. And this one, D, okay, this one is not chloroplast. So this is an animal cell. How can I tell? Because it has no cell wall, right? And so chloroplast wouldn't be present in an animal cell. That's how I know, oh, immediately wrong. So D cannot be the answer also. So option B is correct for question 2. Question 3, they want us to find which row shows conditions that result in uptake using active transport. So that means against the gradient, against concentration gradient. Okay, and you would only know how to select the right answer if you knew what is the direction that these substances are moving. So for the root hair cells and the soil water, well, okay, they are very nice already. They're telling you, okay, they didn't say which is the direction, but I think you all can know from your basic content knowledge that it's this direction, right? From here, the soil, it goes in the root hair cells. So we're looking for this. So if we want this to be against the gradient, we need this to be low, and then we need this to be high. Okay, and then the next one is ileum, and ileum is the last part of the small intestine. So it absorbs things from... Okay, so sorry for the misspeaking. Ileum is the ileum contents, right? Means what is inside the small intestine's lumen. So it's the food that is being digested. And so the direction is this way. Right, we need it to go into the blood capillaries of the villi. This is the absorbing of it. So that means this must be low and this must be high. This way it would be against the concentration gradient. Okay, so which option is that? Would be option C. So for 3 is C. Now for question 4, so which is the correct, which shows when the food sample is digested, what smaller units are released. So we look at the food test, and what I like to do is I annotate on the paper positive or negative result. Benedict's blue means no precipitate form, negative. Burette, negative also, because it should be purple if it's positive. Ethanol emulsion, there's no emulsion, it's clear, so it's negative. Iodine blue black is positive. So that tells us there is starch. And if there is starch, then when starch is digested, because that's what they're asking, right? Digested, you get maltose. Okay, do I see the option for maltose? I don't. So let's digest it further. What do you get? Glucose. So the answer has to be glucose, option C. Okay, the diagrams here shows an enzyme, okay, and the substrate, then the products, and enzyme substrate complex. Okay, So enzyme substrate complex is when it has bound to the substrate together. So this must be the ES complex. Okay, and from there I can already eliminate A and C out. Okay, then next, the products are the same, so I'm not going to look at that. Let's just look at the substrate or enzyme, okay? So substrate, is it 4 or 1? So this one is the active site. Active site, which is complementary to the substrate, which is number 1. Okay, so active site must be present on the enzyme, can't be present on the substrate, right? So 4 is the enzyme, and substrate is 1. So the answer would be option D. This shows us the energy, how it changes during a reaction without an enzyme, without. So this is the normal reaction. And now we learned something called activation energy, which is the energy required to start a chemical reaction. So here's the activation energy, and that gap over there, that bump, shows how big the energy is required. So the energy level now, when it's catalyzed by an enzyme, the starting should be the same, and the ending will also be the same. All the enzyme does is it affects this part, which is the reaction. And so it brings down the activation energy to a lower amount. That's what enzymes do. So which option shows that? It is the same starting and ending, but the bump is now smaller, will be option B. Because you see that small bump. So B is correct. This one is actually a bigger bump, so it can't be correct. C shows that it starts here, which is wrong. Right, remember I said they have to start and end at the same level. And D shows a bigger bump again, so this is wrong. Okay, so question 6 is B. Question 7, which villus here will give you the most rapid absorption of digested food substances into the blood by diffusion? So if you compare all these options, right, the only difference is like how long is this villus, and looking at the blood capillaries, how branched are they? Okay, option C is special because it has thicker, for some reason the cells look thicker. Okay, so we'll discuss all these things. So firstly, branch, right, the more branch it is, then the more SA to V you get, surface area to volume ratio. And that increases the rate of diffusion. Okay, what else? Notice how long this one is. So longer also increase SA to V, increase SA to V, and then you know the result is increases diffusion rate. Okay, so we're looking for one that is long and has many branches. So which one fits that? Okay, this one is long, option D is long but not enough branches. B has both of those. And for C, right, you notice it's very thick compared to the other options. And that means that it's harder for things to diffuse across because there's more distance to diffuse across. And so that makes it a downside actually. So the best one will be option B for question 7. Question 8, so we get this circulatory system diagram, and then they ask you greatest amino acids, greatest urea, and lowest urea. So let's find which I have those requirements. Greatest amino acids will come from the food absorbed. So after digestion in the alimentary canal, then you absorb all the amino acids, and it goes through the hepatic portal vein to the liver. So this will have the highest amino acids in the whole body, right? So they didn't tell you that the person ate a meal, but we assume that because looking at the options also, right, 2 of the options show number 3, so it's probably correct. So okay, it's one of these 2. Next, greatest urea. Now where is the source of all urea? The source is the liver. Okay, because the liver has the process called deamination, where it will convert excess amino acids to urea. That's why number 6, which is the hepatic vein, will have the highest urea coming out of it. So that's why we choose 6. Okay, next is lowest urea. So where we'll have the lowest urea in the whole body is after the blood has been cleaned by the kidneys. So what the kidneys do is they so-called clean the blood. Just like a fish tank filter will filter out the dirt out of the water, the kidneys filter out the dirt out of the blood, including things like urea because it's a waste product. So that means here we'll have very low urea because it's very clean. So number 5 for the last column, and then you'll get option D. So question 8 is option D. Question 9, so we can see here that they are increasing the CO2 in the air from 0 to whatever percent, and the rate of photosynthesis increases accordingly. Now they did 3 experiments. So first experiment is low light, and you can see that okay, there is an increase when you increase the CO2, but it gets limited after a certain time. Now for the higher light intensity, medium and high, they merge it into the same graph. So let's just assume that the results are the same. That's why they merge it into the same graph. Okay, so this is actually 2 experiments, and they're both showing the same result here. So what's happening is that at this point, 0.08, right, percent CO2 and higher, notice that the rate does not increase anymore. So whenever you have graphs like this and the x-axis no longer impacts the rate, that means the x-axis no longer impacts the y-axis, that means that the x-axis is no longer limiting, no longer a limiting factor. Okay, so that means that CO2 is no longer limiting at 0.08 onwards. Okay, so the question asks, at what CO2 concentration does another factor other than light and CO2 concentration start to limit the rate of photosynthesis? What does this mean? It's quite a complicated phrasing, right? So let's make it simple. It's trying to say, when will light and CO2 no longer be limiting? No longer limiting. That's why it says other than these two. That means that these two are no longer limiting, but something else is limiting. So light must not be limiting and CO2 must not be limiting. Okay, so in terms of light, right, at low light intensity, if you look at this, what is the reason for this difference? The reason for this difference is that we were using less light. So light was limiting the rate of photosynthesis. Okay, but then at the high, which is in this experiment, right, in the high light intensity, notice that it's already here, like it doesn't, so we can assume that light is no longer limiting at this point on this experiment because they're already using high light intensity. Plus the x-axis, which is CO2 concentration, after you go higher than 0.08, right, it just plateaus. That means that it doesn't help with increasing the rate of photosynthesis already. So that tells us that it's no longer limiting, and light is also no longer limiting at 0.08. So that's why answer is B. Okay, question 10 is a very easy one. So if you study our notes, right, you know that in the leaf diagram, the leaf cross-section, the part of the vascular bundle on the top half, which is tissue X in this case, this top half is xylem. And then the bottom half is phloem. Okay, so because of that content knowledge, now we just check which column matches that, which row matches that. So X must be xylem, and then Y must be phloem. Okay, what does xylem transport? Water and mineral salts. Phloem transports water, sugar like sucrose, and amino acids. Okay, so answer is D. Now question 11. So which statement explains why transpiration occurs? So option A says carbon dioxide only enters a leaf if the stomata are open. That's true, right? If the stomata are closed, CO2 can't diffuse in. So water vapor diffuses out and is lost. So this is actually the learning outcome of transpiration is a consequence of gaseous exchange. It is actually stating it in that phrasing, right? We want CO2 to come in, and because we need that gaseous exchange, the downside or the consequence is that we will lose water vapor. Okay, so this is correct so far. Let's see if there's a better option. Then B says photosynthesis only use water produced by respiration. So all water supply. Okay, at this point I already know it's wrong because photosynthesis does not only use water by respiration. It can also use water that comes up through the roots. So B is wrong. C says so the plant can transport amino acids. Well, that's not what is transported in the xylem, right? Because transpiration is about pulling things out the xylem. So C is wrong. And then D says so that water produced from respiration can be excreted. So okay, maybe this is true. Maybe it is true that this is one of the functions of transpiration, right? But is it really the main reason? Is it the main function? That's not the main purpose of transpiration, right? The main purpose is so we can pull things up so that the xylem can actually get that upward force. So this is not really the main purpose for option D. So option A is the best answer out of these two. Okay, cool. This is another similar question about position of xylem and phloem. So let's look at the stem first. Now the one on the inside is xylem. and the one on the outside is phloem. So how do I know this? The memory shortcut that I use is that, the memory hack that I use is, xylem carries water, right? Now, if you go without food or water, which is more important? You'll die earlier if you go without water, right? So water is more important. That's why it needs to be kept further inside the stem to protect it, because it's more important, right? So that's why xylem is on the inside. Okay, so if number 1 is xylem, and then let's see then for the leaf, right? Like I said earlier in the earlier question, xylem is on the top also, and then phloem is on the bottom. So they ask you which tissue supports the leaf and the stem. Okay, so which tissue has a supporting function, a structural support function, and that would be xylem, because xylem has lignin. Oops, let me move me away. Yeah, xylem has lignin, which can support the plant, help support the plant. So we're looking for option 1 in both. We're looking for xylem in both of the columns, right? So xylem and xylem. That's why the answer will be A. So question 13, which row is correct? Now let's look at C and D first. So option C says that involved phloem is transpiration. We know that is not true, right? Phloem is for translocation, moving food and everything else which is manufactured throughout the phloem. That's called translocation. So C is wrong. And then for involved xylem, it says transpiration, no. Okay, we know that's a mistake already. So D is also wrong. So it has to be A or B. Okay, A says transpiration, movement of substances in one direction. That is correct. We have a one-directional transport from the roots to the leaves only. This is correct. Translocation, it says nope, it's not one direction, which is true because it actually goes in 2 directions. So this is also correct, right? 2 directions, both up and down the plant. Okay, so A is correct so far. Let's look at B. B says continue in darkness. Can transpiration do that? Yes, it doesn't even need energy. So transpiration always continues, whether it's photosynthesis or not. And then for translocation, actually it's also yes. Why? Although it does need energy, right? But the plant can go through respiration, aerobic respiration. Even if it's dark, they can still produce energy so that translocation can still continue. So B is wrong. 13 is A. Okay, question 14. So which row shows the functions of blood plasma? Forms antibodies. That's actually a type of white blood cell called a lymphocyte. So it's not formed by the blood plasma. It's carried in the blood plasma, but not formed by blood plasma. So X would be the answer. Then carries hormones to target organs is true because that's how the endocrine system works, right? It's carried in the bloodstream. So it should be tick. Okay, we can already see the answer must be C, right? Okay, contains hemoglobin is no because the hemoglobin is in red blood cells, not in the blood plasma. And then last one, transports glucose, salts, and vitamins. These are all the dissolved substances in the blood plasma. So the answer is yes. Okay, so the answer has to be C. Okay, so for this question, I have actually written out what are the antibodies that person will have in their blood. Okay, so for blood group A person, they will have anti-B. That means the antibodies are targeting B, the B antigen, because it's not supposed to exist in a blood group A person, right? And then for this question, they want to talk about child 3. Child 3 needs an urgent transfusion. So we need to give blood, basically containing red blood cells, to child 3 who has anti-A. Okay, anti-A antibodies because they are B. Meaning, any blood group A cannot give already. So it cannot be mother. Okay, then blood group AB also has the A antigen on the red blood cells, which will be attacked by the anti-A in the child 3. So cannot. Okay, and then let's look at the father and the child 2, which is blood group O. So this is the same blood type, right? So it should work. And this is blood group O, which you learn is the universal donor, so it should work. Okay, but now let's talk about antigens and antibodies, right? Why does it work? Because when doing a blood transfusion, they only take the red blood cells, they separate out the blood plasma, and that means that we're not going to transfer the antibodies of that donor. So you don't even have to worry about these antibodies for the donor. Okay, I know it's a huge confusion point. For many students, they're like, hey, wait, but it shouldn't work because the antibodies of the donor will go and mess with the recipient, but you don't have to care. You only look at what are the red blood cells. That's the only thing that's transported, that's going to be donated. So the blood group O has no antigens, so it's safe. And then the blood group B has B antigens, and there's nothing targeting B antigens in child 3. So that's why it's father and child 2, which is option C. This graph is the cardiac cycle graph. They're asking you when does semilunar aortic valve open and when does it close. So this is the left side of the heart, right? What's happening here is ventricular systole. That's why there's this huge spike in blood pressure. And it will force open the aortic semilunar valve at this point. So that's how blood goes into the aorta. And then when diastole starts, it will try and backflow. That's why the valve will shut close. So close SL valve here before it can backflow. So X for open and Y for close. So the answer is C. Okay, question 17. You see that during exercise, blood flows more rapidly through capillaries surrounding the alveoli. That's true, right? Because our blood is pumped around the body faster when we are exercising. So what's the effect on diffusion of either oxygen or carbon dioxide? Let's look at options B and D because they talk about diffusion distance. So let's look at this diagram on the right. What's the diffusion distance? Is the distance that the gases here need to pass through to be able to reach the destination. Do you think that changes just because the blood is pumped faster? It doesn't change the structure of the alveoli, right? So the diffusion distance is the same for both of these, same. So B and D are definitely wrong. So now it's just between A and C. So C says increase concentration gradient for oxygen. Now this is true. Why is it true? Because what's happening here, right, is that once O2 diffuse in, let's say at first in the new air that is breathed in is 10 units. And then once it comes in, maybe when the blood just arrives, it's 1 unit of oxygen. And so if you let this sit here for a while, it will diffuse to even out. So it will be 5.5 and 5.5. Yes. Okay, so that's diffusion. It will even out. It will reach equilibrium. Okay, but if you take the blood away, then it doesn't have a chance to reach equilibrium. It maintains the difference in concentrations. So there's a steep gradient, right? So that's why blood constantly needs to flow through the alveoli to maintain that steep gradient. Now what happens if you move the blood faster? That means you are doing an even better job at maintaining that steep gradient because maybe, normal circumstance, right? What happens is that there is some time for the oxygen in this area to increase. Okay, so I'm talking about in the blood. Maybe there's some time for the oxygen amount to increase, right? And then that reduces the steepness of the gradient. But if we keep on bringing in fresh blood that only has 1 unit of oxygen because it is, it hasn't got oxygenated yet by the lungs, then that always means that, wow, the difference between the air and the blood one will be very steep. So by bringing in fresh deoxygenated blood at a faster rate, you are doing a better job at maintaining this steep gradient. So it should be increases the concentration gradient. Okay, the same applies for CO2. So for CO2, it must be high in the blood and low in the alveolar air space, then you will have diffusion, right? So what we want is to make sure that the CO2 in here that is brought in, maybe it's like 10 units of CO2, is very high compared to the alveolar air space. That's how you maintain a steep gradient. So by bringing in fresh deoxygenated blood very quickly, you're always making sure that the blood that is passing through has very high CO2. And so that maintains a very steep concentration gradient. Okay, so this should be increases, not decreases. So the answer is C for question 17. Question 18. So which process do not require energy from respiration? Do not require. So please don't make a careless mistake when you did this question. Cell division, yes, we need, because we need to create a whole new cell, right? That creation of so many things results in a lot of production, a lot of synthesis, and that all needs energy. Option 2, contracting heart muscle. Well, every time there's a muscle involved and it contracts, it actually uses up energy. So yes, we need. Okay, movement of oxygen from alveoli to the blood is diffusion, so no need. Same for number 5, carbon dioxide is diffusion, so no need. Okay, maintaining a constant body temperature. And so what are the responses, right? There's metabolic rate. How do we increase metabolic rate? We will increase the rate of aerobic respiration. So I know they didn't say whether it's a cold or hot scenario, but if it's a cold scenario, you see, you're already gonna need more energy release. Okay, and all those responses, right, they do take energy as well. Example, shivering. Example, sweating more. Okay, so all these things like producing sweat, does it require energy? I believe producing sweat does require a bit of energy. But anyway, this one is a good enough reason to convince me that it does need energy. So the answer is 3 and 5, option D. Question 19 is one of the questions which I think a lot of students will get wrong because it's a common trick or misconception question. So I always tell my students that when you see this kind of question, right, air pressure and in the lungs is opposite to lung volume. Opposite to lung volume. So that means when you see the air pressure here, which is during time x, right, air pressure is increasing. That means the lung volume is decreasing, meaning you're breathing out. Okay, breathe out. So we want to see which option shows breathing out. Diaphragm is relaxing. Yes, it should be a yes. External contract, no, because the point of the external intercostal is to pull the ribs to the external exterior, which is out, right? When you breathe in, then you will need that to happen. But when you breathe out, you want the external to relax. So this should be no. Lung volume is decreasing, not increasing. So it's yes, no, no. So that will be answer B. Question 20. When you have kidney failure, you need dialysis. What always remains in your blood during dialysis? Well, whatever does not diffuse out will always remain in your blood. So all these things, they diffuse out because they're small, but blood cells, they do not diffuse out because they're too big for them to come out of that partially permeable tubing. 21. Blood contains proteins, but they're not found in urine. Why? Well, the answer is they are too big, right? They're too large to even pass through the glomerulus walls during ultrafiltration. So they don't even enter the nephrons. B is the answer. Okay, so if you look at A, right, it says contained in blood cells and pass straight through. No, they don't pass through. Okay, they don't pass through, so A is wrong. C says proteins are reabsorbed. No, they don't even pass through, so how can they be reabsorbed, right? They don't even enter the nephrons. Then D says proteins pass out of the arterial end of the capillary. Okay, once I see pass, I already know it cannot be the answer. So answer is B. Question 22. Now what is X and Y? X is the capillaries in the skin. Y is a sweat duct connected to a sweat gland. Which row shows what happens when the body temperature increase? So you're getting hotter, right? What happens? When you're hotter, what happens to the sweating? Increase sweating. So yes, you will increase flow of the sweat because more sweat is coming out this way. So yes, it is increased. Okay, now flow of liquid in X. What happens at the capillaries, right? This is an arteriole, and the arteriole will dilate when you're too hot, so that more blood will flow to X. And why do we want more blood to go there? Because that means more more just heat is lost, right? Latent heat is the sweating. More heat loss through conduction, convection, and radiation. Okay, so we want more fluid to go through X. Increase. Answer is D. So 23 shows a negative feedback cycle, and they don't list it in order. They jumbled up the order with the options. So first, what happens? Blood temperature falls. Second, that's actually the stimulus. Second, the control center, which is the brain, hypothalamus in the brain, the thermoreceptors will detect the change in temperature, detect the stimulus. Okay, then they are like the boss, right? So they will tell the rest of the body what to do. They will kickstart the corrective mechanisms. And one of those mechanisms is shivering. Okay, and then that results in the blood temperature increasing back to normal. So which is the corrective mechanism? Which is the response? The response is D, the shivering. Question 24. An eye detects an object flying towards it. Okay, and then what happens is you close your eyelids, right? So who detects? Receptor. What do we use to see things? It's our retina, right? Because the photoreceptors are on the retina. Then the neuron going to the brain is sending the info to the brain. That is the sensory neuron carried in the optic nerve. Then neuron from the brain is to go to the eyelid muscles to tell eyelids to close. So that has to be a motor neuron. Okay, so the answer will be option D. 5, right? It says which parts are responsible for focusing light onto the retina. Focusing light onto the retina. So number 1 is ciliary body, and yes, this is part of the focusing reflex, right? Number 3 is the lens, and of course the lens needs to change how convex it is to focus on different distance of objects. And then for number 4, this is the choroid. Okay, choroid is not involved in focusing anything or helping light to get on the retina at all. It's just here to, number 1, provide nutrients to the eyeball. Number 2 is black in color to prevent internal reflection of light. So it's not related. Okay, but then what about number 2, right? Number 2 is cornea. And it turns out that the cornea does refract light. So refraction is when light hits the cornea, right? It will bend light to change direction so that it can go towards the retina. So technically, it is helping. So 1, 2, and 3 are all helping, and therefore option A is correct. Question 26. Where are the islets or Langerhans found in the body? Is pancreas. Okay, what do they produce? They produce glucagon, insulin, but not glycogen. Right? Glycogen is when glucose molecules are being stored in mammals, they are stored as this very long big molecule called glycogen. Glucagon is the hormone. Okay, so option C is the answer. 27, which describes an example of asexual reproduction. So we're trying to see that there is no fertilization and you form offspring. That is asexual. So injured starfish growing replacement leg, but there's no new starfish formed in this statement. So A is wrong. Now B says 4 genetic identical strawberry plants, offspring, forming from a barren plant. So yes, this is asexual reproduction, most likely, right? Because there's offspring, it's one plant plus is genetically identical. Okay, so it's probably B. And then option C says genetic modification of bacteria. Well, that's just genetic engineering. And D says 2 gametes fusing form a zygote. This is called fertilization, and that's sexual reproduction. So the answer has to be option B. Okay, this is 28, and M is an anther. N is the feathery stigma of this wind-pollinated flower. So we are looking for anther and stigma. So the answer is A. Question 29. The diagram represents movement of substances between mother's and fetus blood in the placenta. So overall, there is a movement of nutrients towards the fetus. And overall, there is a movement of waste from the fetus. Okay, this is the overall net movement of substances. So which molecules? Number 1, protein and hemoglobin. Now maybe some proteins can get through, but this is usually in our syllabus, proteins are too big to pass through capillaries. Then hemoglobin, nope, because that would be contained within red blood cells. Why is it coming out of the red blood cells? So oxygen, yes, is one of the nutrients that needs to get across, right? Number 2, vitamins, okay. And then number 3, urea. That makes sense. As for number 2, right, can urea get across? The answer is yes, but we are trying to show the overall movement here. So overall, what is moving? Is it urea? No, right? It's the other way around. Waste should come towards the mother. So number 2 should show a nutrient. So that's why the answer is C. Okay, here is question 30, and it's actually a repeated TYS question. So if you did your TYS practice, then 3 marks kind of. So they are asking you which graph shows during 10 to 18 of a menstrual cycle. So what are the dotted and solid lines? Is estrogen for the dotted, and solid line is progesterone. So now I'm going to draw for you here. Let's see if I have space. Okay, I'll just use this space for now. And I will draw the menstrual cycle graph. You're expected to know the shape of this graph. So it's also in our notes, and it's also in the textbook. Here's how the graph looks like. So I'm going to use the dotted line for estrogen. Okay, let me draw 0, 14, 28. Okay, this is the day, and then the hormone levels. So at day 14, just before day 14, you have this steep increase because that is when ovulation is going to happen in estrogen. Okay, then around day 21, we have another small peak in the estrogen. Okay, why does it happen is our syllabus, don't worry. And then it will go down to 28. Okay, so this is how it looks like for estrogen graph. Now what about progesterone? Progesterone will peak at day 21, and it's a smaller peak. So, oops, that's a bit ugly. Yes, that's better. Okay. So this is the graph, right? This is your content knowledge. Now they're asking day 10 to 18. So day 10, where is that? This is like 7, right? So 10 is like here. Now 18 is like here. Okay, so we're looking for this range, 10 to 18. So let's see which graph fits that the best. We are trying to see a peak in the estrogen, and we are trying to see an increasing progesterone. So let's look at this. Is there a peak in estrogen? No, look at the dotted estrogen. It is doing some funny stuff. So A is no. Okay, in fact, they have a peak in the progesterone instead. Okay, let's look at B. Why is the progesterone doing this? Why is it decreasing? It should show a upward, right? So B is wrong. C, okay, why is progesterone so high? It should not even be that high before. It should be low and then going up. So C is wrong. And then D shows a peak here and an increasing in progesterone. Now I would prefer if the graph showed more accurately this, okay, but D is the best option we got out of the 4, so we have to choose D. Okay, 31, what results when one cell with 4 pairs of chromosomes completes the first division of meiosis, meiosis 1 basically. Okay, so let's see what happens. So 4 pairs of chromosomes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 chromosomes total, right? So what happens is that the homologous pairs are separated due to anaphase 1, and I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, notice that they are no longer in pairs because anaphase 1 separates homologous pairs. Okay, so pairs are separated. Okay, because the pairs are separated, I cannot choose any option that shows the word pairs. There are no more homologous pairs, they've been separated into different daughter cells. So B and D are wrong. Okay, so it's A and C, right? 2 cells with 4 chromosomes each, yes, 4, and then 2 chromosomes each, no, right? It's 4 chromosomes each. So that's just it. So just draw out a simple diagram like that and it will help you a lot. Question 32, so a cell during a stage of mitosis, so it has to be P, M, A or T. And what we see here is that the centromeres have divided, they are being put to the opposite poles. So this is called anaphase, where they are being put away to the opposite poles. Anaphase. Okay, so if it's anaphase, then now let's check. Alright, good, we have A or B. And then which stage is this on that timeline, right? Mass of DNA. Which row identifies, okay, and the mass of DNA at the corresponding point in the graph. So it says here it's the mass of DNA in a cell, right? This is the graph, in a cell. So see, even when the chromosomes are moving apart, even during anaphase, the mass of DNA in that cell does not change. The DNA position, is moving, yes, the chromosomes are moving, but the total mass of DNA in that cell is still the same during anaphase. The only time where it will halve is during cytokinesis. Because when the cell splits, so here let's say it's like 2x amount of DNA, right? Once finished, now each cell has x amount of DNA. So it will only halve after cytokinesis is over. So I should not see this and I should not see this. It should still remain up here. So that's why it is H. So 32 is A. Question 33. Which stage is shown? Metaphase or telophase? We have to choose between these two. Now, the fact that they all lined up along this equator very nicely, like just look at the position of the centromeres. It's all along an equator line, right? So it has to be metaphase. Okay, metaphase is the answer. So it's A or B. Okay, now is it dividing by mitosis or meiosis? Now, by the way, this is a reuse question. They just changed the diagram from a previous TYS. So it has to be, it's either mitosis or meiosis. Now, if it is meiosis, right? So mito or meo, then it could be metaphase 1 or metaphase 2. Okay, if it is metaphase 1, you would see them pairing up in pairs like this along the equator. They will be pairing up 2 by 2, not 1 by 1. So that tells us it cannot be metaphase 1. So let me just remove that. Now for metaphase 2, right? Well, would you have homologous pairs in metaphase 2? In anaphase 1, homologous are separated. So they're no longer in partners, right? Within the same cell. So metaphase 2 should not have any homologous pairs. Now if you look at this, we have this one and this number 1, which is at the same pair. Why are they same pair? Because they're the same shape, centromere position and size. Then this one is the medium length. Number 2 is the second pair. And then this one is the short length, is number 3, the third pair. So the homologous pairs are present, and that tells you that it cannot be metaphase 2. So meiosis is out. Therefore, the answer is mitosis. So the answer is B. 34. Which statement is correct? So in a DNA molecule, cytosine equals to adenine number. So A and T are the pair, and G and C are the pair. Okay, you can remember this as apple tree, A and T pair, and garage stores a car, or a car is stored in a garage. So G and C pair. So C and T and A have no business pairing, right? It does not mean anything. So A is out. Okay, B says a nucleotide consists of a base, phosphate group, and sugar molecule. That is true. Okay, this is a nucleotide. So B is correct. Now C says a gene is a sequence of amino acids. No, a gene is a sequence of nucleotides. So C is wrong. All chromosomes have 46 genes. Actually, no. They can have thousands of genes, I believe. Yeah. So 46 is the number of chromosomes in a human, right? In a diploid human cell. So the answer is B for 34. Next one, 35. What's happened here is that they have taken special genes from fish and put them into a different species, which is plants. So when you do this kind of genetic engineering, right, how do I know? It's because scientists have transferred, so it's genetic engineering. And it's across species, right? This is called foreign genes because they're different species. Foreign genes are being transferred. This is called a transgenic plant or transgenic organism. So the answer is D. 36 is more like an English question because why are genes considered a unit of inheritance? What does the word inherit mean? You know when people say like, oh, you know, like this person has inherited a lot of money from their parents. That means the parents have passed down a lot of money to the child. That's called an inheritance, right? Inherit means to take something that's been passed down to you, to get it. So that is the meaning of the word, and therefore let's check which option makes that, matches that. So option C says transmitted or passed down from one generation to the next. Okay, so no other option really has this idea of passing down to the next generation. Therefore, C is the best answer. Question 37. In a breed of sheep, black wool is dominant to white fur. So black fur, right? Well, let's use big B, and then white, let's use small b. Okay, so a sheep with black, okay, this could be big B, or heterozygous, is mated, crossed with white. So white is homo recessive for sure. Okay, and a black fur sheep is produced, or lamb rather. So this black lamb must be big B, small b. How do I know that? Because it's black. So it means it has the big B allele. And one of the alleles given must have been a small b allele because the white fur parent can only give the small b. So it must give at least one, right, to this sheep. So we know that this lamb here is heterozygous. So when it is grown up, it mates with, so this is heterozygous, it mates with white fur sheep, which is small b, small b. Okay, what is the offspring ratio? So the offspring ratio of this, if you were to do a simple square, Punnett square rough diagram. Okay, as you can see, it is 1:1. This will give you 1 black is to 1 white. Okay, so 1 black is to 1 white, 1:1, the answer is B. So 38. This is someone who has very cool mutation, has extra finger here, and they tell you it's a dominant condition. Dominant. So now we can fill in everything on this thing because those with the condition have at least one of the dominant alleles. Those without must be homozygous recessive. So let's just use the alphabet A, okay, for this. So all those without the condition must be small a, homozygous recessive. Okay, now we just need to fill in the rest. So how would you produce this child? One of them came from here. The other allele must have come from this person. So we know that they have one small a, and since they have the disease, they must have at least one of the dominant alleles. Now this person, again, it's the same scenario, you see, this came from one parent, right? The other one must have come from the other parent. So we have the same scenario, this must be heterozygous as well. Now what about the other two children? They are affected the dominant allele, right? Dominant disease, so they must have at least one, but the father can only give them, well, the recessive allele. So we know that the other one must be a recessive. If that was too fast, just watch that part again, okay? And this is all the genotypes. So let's see, both 1 and 2 are heterozygous. That is true, because they are this. Okay, and then both 1 and 2 are homozygous. Nope. Individual 1 is heterozygous, 2 is homozygous. Okay, so they're just figuring out what's 1 and 2, which we've already done in the above. So that's why the answer is option A. Okay, question 39, trophic levels, ecosystem, carbon cycle, and transfer of energy. Okay, let's make sense of this. So you notice this, right? And once I see this little thing, a two-way direction of transferring carbon, I know, oh, plant, right? Because one of this must be aerobic respiration, and then the other one, why is carbon going from the atmosphere to the plant, is photosynthesis. So B is producer, plant. Okay, and that tells me that this whole thing here is the atmosphere. That's what it represents. Atmospheric CO2. Okay, so primary consumer, respiration, that's why it gives carbon to the atmosphere. Secondary consumer, same thing. And then tertiary consumer. Okay, this diagram isn't perfect. They should have drawn the dotted carbon transfer to the atmosphere also, tertiary consumer. But yes, we have no choice. We have to choose this option. So what is this arrow that carbon is transferred to the producers, right? It could represent maybe decomposition, where the carbon will then be released back to atmosphere and then absorbed by the producers. So, yeah, this is option A for 39. Okay, last question. Some activities are here which can help to maintain the biodiversity. So good for environment. Number 1 says use insecticides. Now once you see that, it's like, oof, because insecticides can kill good insects, can kill too many insects, and it can lead to biomagnification up the food chain also if the insecticides are not excretable. So 1 is out. Number 2, selective logging. So that only trees over a particular height are cut down, meaning you are saving the young trees. You're not killing the young trees. Okay, which is good. This is one of the ways to not cut down too much, and it's a sustainable way, so that there's always future trees which will grow up. So 2 is good. And then 3 says remove dead wood from the forest floor. So it looks like, wow, you're very clean, helping the forest to be clean. But hey, this dead wood, right, lots of decomposers are there, many different types of organisms. Maybe there are even animals hiding in the logs, in the dead logs, right, and seeking shelter. Maybe it's their habitat, so you don't anyhow remove. And then number 4 says replanting. Of course, this is good. So 2 and 4, the answer is D.